ladies and gents, welcome to TFI in the first video episode in a new series that I'm going to have on the channel called Reasons to Use Vault Professional. There's a lot of reasons to use Vault Professional, so I can't do it all in one video, which is why I'm breaking it up into episodes. And the first in the series is this. It's File Lifecycle and Revision Control. So we're going to look at what that is, what it does, how it helps you. And it's not a training course, it's not a tutorial, it's more of a demo or a sales pitch, if you like, even though I'm not getting paid for it. It's just more of a demo overview type of thing to show people what you get from this kind of thing. That's kind of what this is about. So let's go over to Inventor, and I'm going to check in a file into Vault so you can see what happens when you don't have File and Lifecycle Revision Control enabled. And that's essentially like working with Vault Basic, right? So I'll show you what that means, right? So here's a file in the assembly. Let's check that in. It's just the display port IPT, that one there. That goes across into Vault, into this folder here, and then you can see it there, sat in a folder, doing nothing, minding its own business. It is literally just a file in a folder. It goes onto the base category. It doesn't have a state, it doesn't have a revision. So if you were to try and change the state of it, i.e. release it, or put it into a checking state, for example, like you would think you could do, you can't. There is no states there, there is no revision there, there's nothing. You can't do anything with it. It's just a file in a folder. If this was a real production model and you were to release it, like someone was to approve it and release it, you can't lock it. It's just still sat there in a folder. You could edit this if you want to. So we need to be able to fix that, right? So let's delete this from Vault, and I'll show you how you set up the life cycles so that they work for you. That's what you got to do. You can use them out the box if you want, but there's still a bit of customization that you've got to do to get it to work for you. So let's go over to the Vault settings, and I'll show you how you go about setting these things up briefly. Obviously, like I said, this is a day's training course if you were to go to a training course for this sort of thing. So we'll go over to categories. Categories are categories. It's difficult to explain what a category is, really, because it's a category, but it defines what file you're putting it in a Vault. It defines what type of file it is, and the category then dictates what lifecycle and revision scheme your file is placed under. So we can create our own. We can say, right, we're a file category is here. We can have the base category, which is the default one. That's what the display port went on. The default one is ticked, which means that if the file doesn't meet any criteria or rules, any predefined customization, Vault will put the file in the base category by default. We've also got design representation, office, and standard categories. Each one of these categories has its own little lifecycle default, its own revision scheme default. So for example, design representation, that's meant to be for PDFs in Vault 2018. Vault PDFs go on the standard alphabetic format for revisions, A, B, C, D, E, etc. And then life cycles, they have their own life cycle process. Whereas Office files, they use what's called a simple release process, and standard files use the basic release process. And you're like, well, what's the difference? Well, I'll show you that in a second. So we need to create our own category. So we'll select New, and I'll say, right, Inventor Data. This is not how I would set it up in real life. Again, I can't really go into it in detail here without waffling on for hours, but right, category for Inventor files. But in short, I would create a category, and this is just me, I would create a category for Inventor file types. Like you'd have a category for models, for drawings, for presentation files. You'd have another category for things like shrink-wrapped files, derived parts, that kind of thing, to differentiate those from standard models that would be on a proper release process. But anyway, that's that. Different people do different things in different ways. So we'll select Inventor Data. That's done. The category is created. Next thing we've got to do is assign the category to a lifecycle and revision scheme. What? Right. So you go over to life cycles, and Vault gives you a stack of life cycles to use out the box, and they're fine. They actually do work. They do work pretty good. But what I tend to do is create a copy of the flexible release process, which tends to be the one that you can use as a good solid starting point for most drawing offices. So each one of these release processes comes with states, and a state is it's a flag. It's a state, man. They've done a good job with the naming. It's a state, for crying out loud. I'm trying to explain it in a different way. It's a state that's applied against your file, and it tells the world what state your file is in. By default, all files start in the work in progress state. The file is work in progress. It's still being worked on. You can still check it in. You can still check it out. Then you've got the for review state / checking state. Released, that means it's been approved, it's been signed off, it's locked, it's now getting built or it's getting bought. And then what you would do is you would move the file between the different states. So a file will get moved from released to work in progress, which means a change needs to happen to something that's being built. Therefore, it needs to go up a revision, and Vault will handle that for you as well. We've also got the quick change state. The quick change state is really useful. It's normally, I'm saying normally in my world, it could be different in other people's worlds, but in my world, quick change is normally reserved for administrators. It's an admin task. It's for changing a released document. You've released something, you've spotted a spelling mistake, and you need to create a quick change to it without bumping the revision up. So you'd put the file into quick change, fix the spelling error on the drawing, and then put it back into the released state. That's what quick change is for. And obviously got obsolete for parts that have been completely eradicated from existence and you don't want people to use them anymore. You put them into the obsolete state. Okay, so each one of these states then has its own set of properties, its own set of actions and permissions and triggers and stuff that you can do. Like, for example, the work in progress state. If you go to the transitions tab, you can tell the Vault to do certain things when a file moves from work in progress to a different state. So if we edit this I'll tell you what, let's create our own first before we start editing them. So we'll create a copy of the flexible release process and we'll call this DFI Lifecycle release process. And we'll put this one against the Inventor data category. So anything on the Inventor data category can use this lifecycle. And then we can also start renaming the states. If some companies don't call things WIP, they call them, maybe preliminary work in progress. For review might be called checking in some companies. They call it the checking state. WIP, you might just want to call that WIP. You might want to call this, built, or, I don't know, whatever. Who knows? It's entirely down to the company that you work for and what your working practices are. You can put a state description. Thing is built / bought. And then people can see the description. So you've full control of this. It's really nice, actually. It is really nice. Right, for the WIP state, I mentioned that you can have actions when a file goes between two different states. So when a file moves from the WIP state to the released state, you can say to Vault, do something. Right, we need to save that, actually. We need to save that first before we go in here. Right, do something. Actions. When a file moves from WIP to released, synchronize the properties using the job server and then update the PDF using the job server. So when it goes from WIP to released, Vault will automatically create a PDF when your file's released. Isn't that good? That's something you would do yourself manually, but the Vault can do it for you. You have to offload that work to the job server, which is something we'll have to do in another video. Reasons to use Vault Professional. Job server. It's okay. I'm going to just fall short slightly of using the word brilliant. It's okay. It's okay. It does the job. Right, but then these actions they're pretty set in stone. You can create your own actions under custom jobs. You can get a developer to write your own set of routines and custom applications which do certain things that your company needs to do when a file moves from a certain state to another certain state, and that could be literally anything. For example, you might create your own PDFs at the moment and then move them to a certain folder on a network share or put them in SharePoint. Well, you can write a custom job that after your PDF's been made, the custom job fires and then moves your PDF to SharePoint. You can have someone write a utility to do that. Vault does not do that out the box. Right, then we've got security. This is a area where you can tell Vault who can and who can't move something from WIP to released. Typically, you would have security at this point. You would say to Vault, I don't want every Tom, Dick and Harry moving files from WIP to released, because that's at the point where a bomb's generated and things get bought and things get built. So you want somebody in a trying to pick my words carefully here, in a drawn office with multiple users and tiered structured hierarchy and management. You'd typically have somebody doing the work and then somebody else, a team leader, a senior, who approves the work. That person, that senior, would be the person who moves the files to release. They have to be in a position of responsibility and authority to be able to do that. So you set that up here. So for example, administrator, they can do it. Me, I can do it. Everyone else can't. So this is now an explicit permission. The administrator is allowed to move the files from WIP to released. I am allowed to move the files from WIP to released because nobody else is named. That is an implied deny permission. If you're not named, you don't get the permissions. Okay. Some other things you can do as well is you can control the security of what happens to the files once they're at the state. So for example, when files are in the released state, they are on the released state, you can say everybody is allowed to read the released files, but because there's a blank cell for modify and delete, that's an implied deny permission. So you'd see the padlock next to release files, meaning you're not allowed to edit or delete released files, which again, that's normal. You want that. You don't want people editing released data. That's the whole point of release and lifecycle control, is to stop people edit and released stuff that's built. It's the entire point of it. So you wouldn't mess around with this under most circumstances. So you can do quite a lot in the lifecycle. That's pretty flexible. And we've assigned our new TFI lifecycle release process to my Inventor data category. Well, we've given it the option of using that one, but we have to tie them together in just a short second. Right, let's close that down. Let's go over to revisions. Revisions, you can, if you want to, you can just use the standard alphabetic format or the numeric format. Depends on how your company works. You might use A, B, C, D, E for revisions, or you might use 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, who knows. You could use alphabetic or numeric. Depends on the type of company you work for, but we can create our own TFI revision scheme. And we can say, right, on my TFI revision scheme, I'm not going to have it against any item categories or anything else other than Inventor data. And then we can look at the scheme formats. We've got an alphabetic format, a numeric format, a default ASME Y14.35M, which of course you all know exactly what that means. And then you can create your own. You can create your own numeric or alphabetic revision formats. And you might be thinking, well, why the hell would I want to do that? There's only one alphabet and one set of numbers. Why would you want to create your own? Well, a reason for that, again, this is kudos to the Vault team for implementing this and for factoring this into the product. Some companies might not want to use I or O or S in their revision sequence because that is confused with 1, 0, and 5. So a lot of companies skip out those letters. However, by default, Vault gives you those letters. So you might want to create your own. So what you would do, and I'm not going to do it here because, again, it's not a training course, but you would create a text document, type in the letters that you want to include in the scheme format, and then you would import the text document into here. And it appears as, I've already done one, I can see it's got Rev there. And then that'll use Rev as the format for this revision sequence. Oh, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Right, so did I save that? No, I didn't. I don't care. I can just use the standard one. Right, over to rules. Rules are really important. First rule of... No, don't do that, Neil. So with rules, this allows you to tell Vault when a file enters the Vault, put it on a certain category based on certain rules. And the way you do this, for example, in a drawing office, a proper drawing office with lots and lots of staff checking in lots and lots of files, the Vault I'm currently working with has about 30 or 40 different rules in here because different files need to be filtered off onto different categories and I need to factor in a lot of different file types. But the way you do this is you'd say, right, I want to create a new rule, and my rule is going to be for Inventor data, and it's going to send the files to the Inventor data category. And basically what's going to happen is if the provider of the file, right, if the provider contains Inventor, if you can spell it properly, come on Neil, you've only worked with it for about 15 years, right, provider contains Inventor, hit add. When the Vault detects that the provider is Inventor, it's going to put the file onto the Inventor data category and then hit apply. And there's a number of different ways you can rule files onto categories. You can do things like, right, well, let's do AutoCAD data. Right, AutoCAD files. Yes, you can have provider. I haven't got an AutoCAD category. I'll put it onto Office. You can do it provider equals AutoCAD, but what you can also do are things like if the file extension contains DWG, then put the file onto this category. If the file name contains PNG, so like for image files, that kind of thing. So file rules, we've got that there. New category, new rule, image files. We want to put that onto something like, I don't know, standard. If the file extension, where's file extension? There it is. File extension contains PNG, then put the file onto the image category. And then you can stack up a whole bunch of rules and they work in order. So it'll go chugga down the list. When it hits a rule, it stops there and then it applies that rule to that file. And then apply rules on object creation. That makes sure that the rules are applied as your file enters the Vault. And then the last thing we need to do is just to make sure the category is using the lifecycle and revision scheme that we've just created. So we'll go over to the Inventor data category, go to lifecycles, and I'll make sure that we assign the TFI lifecycle release process to that category. Same goes for the revision sequence. We can assign, no, we didn't assign one, so we can just drag it across from here. We'll use the alphabetic format and then tick that. So that'll be the default one. Office documents use the standard numeric format. Do I want to use the standard numeric format for Office documents? No, I don't. I want to use the alphabetic format, so we can enable that. And this is Vault wide. This applies to everybody who would use your Vault. And starting alphabetic, life cycles, basic release process, simple release process. Okay, we're good to go. Let's go over to Inventor and let's start checking in some stuff to see what happens. So we'll whack in the top level assembly. That's going to take in the top level assembly and all the parts and all the, I've got a couple of JPEGs in there, so we need to capture the JPEGs. So let's go back over to the file rules, and we'll create one more rule, and we'll say JPEG files, and we'll put those onto, what did we put those on? Office, I think we did. No, standard. We'll put them on standard. And then file name or file extension, I think it works with both, contains JPG. Okay, right, that should capture everything. I don't think I've got any bitmaps in here. I'll be annoyed if I do, but we can fix it later on. All right, so check in. We've got the check-in box. JPEG, JPEG, PNG, PNG, JPEG, PNG, and we're all good. Okay, let's whack that into the Vault. So as it's going into the Vault, it's applying the rules as they're entering the Vault. It looks at the file name, the file extension. It says, are you an Inventor file? What's your provider? What's your file extension? And then once it determines that, it puts them onto the relevant categories. And there we go. There's all the files. IPT is now on the Inventor data category. JPEG is on the standard category. And because we've assigned a revision scheme and a lifecycle scheme to the files and to the categories, you can see now all files have started in WIP. It's a bit ugly. I've got WIP and then work in progress because that's on a different lifecycle scheme to the Inventor data. But you can see it's working pretty well. It's applied revision A and the lifecycle scheme to all these files, and it's applied to every single one of them. So they're currently work in progress. What happens next? Well, what you would do next is you would put them, again, it depends on where you work. In a drawing office that has formal processes, you'd put these files into a checking state. So you'd go to the top level assembly, which is the GTX970.IAM, and then you hit change state. And in the change state dialog box, this box here needs to become your best friend when you're working with Vault Lifecycles and Vault Professional, because you can either have nothing underneath and then you're only checking the top level assembly, and you need to become familiar with the include parents and include children buttons down here at the bottom. Also the settings button here, which allows you to include things like library files and related documentation and attachments. So if there's any drawings checked into the Vault, you want to be putting those into the checking state, as well as the JPEG files and the PNG files. You can see them all down here attached to the file that they're placed in. So for all files that are on the TFI lifecycle release process, we can put those into the check-in state, and then same goes for the basic release process. We can put those to the for review state. That's the image files, and there they are, whacked into the checking state. Next thing that would happen is a reviewer or team leader would log into Vault or log in via the web client, the thin client, and they would look at any DWFs you might have created or any PDFs you might have created on transition to checking. So another thing you can do, custom jobs with a PDF creator. You can tell it to create the PDFs as you put it in the checking state, so the team leader can check that PDF rather than have to open up CAD files. And then once the team leader has checked the files, he would then go to the assembly, hit change state, and you say, yes, I am happy with this. I am happy to now put this into the released for manufacture state. And for all the PNG files, it seems a bit silly. What I would normally do in a proper office, which I have done, is instead of it seems ridiculous releasing an image file, because you don't make them, you don't build them, you don't buy them, it's just a picture in the model. So I would normally put image files on a unlocked state, and they would just stay locked stay locked indefinitely. But just for the purposes of the demo, you've got to put them on at the release first state. That's fine, I don't care, hit OK. And that's going to now lock down and release the entire Inventor assembly and all its children, and it's now locked for editing. Because we've still got a copy of these files in the local workspace, you can see here it's saying that there's an incorrect version in your workspace. That's because we've got the WIP version in our workspace, and that's really important. You don't want to keep the WIP version of an assembly in your workspace, because you've got WIP revision A in your workspace. The next thing that's going to happen in this assembly is it's going to go to WIP revision B. You want to get your workspace cleared out as fast as possible. So we can go to the working folder. Here it is, and then we can take all of these files and we can just blitz them away, completely get rid of them, head back over to Vault, do a refresh, and you should see the padlocks there saying that these files are now locked. You can't change them, they're released, they're getting built. Nobody changes these without, for example, raising a change order against them. You'd say, right, next thing we've got to do is going to make a change to this. You'd add it to a change order, and that is for a different video. Right, next thing that would happen is the files will get put into WIP revision B. So you'd go to the assembly, you'd say change state, and we'll say, right, what are we changing? Are we changing the entire product? Normally, no, you're not going to. Maybe the top level assembly is going to go to work in progress, and maybe one or two subparts and sub-assemblies are going to change. So let's whip that and that, and let's head down to the bottom. The GPU or the HDMI, well, you wouldn't change an HDMI port, would you? That would be silly. The heat plate, we need to make a change to the heat plate, so let's whip that, and then you can put a comment down here to say we need to make a mod to the heat plate because of insufficient cooling. Hit OK. And that then whips those parts that I selected in the change state dialog box, and they are now at revision B. And then what you would do, head back over to Inventor, and then if we still have that open now. How did I delete that whilst it was still open? What's Inventor? What is this sorcery? Right, we don't want to save that. So we'll go back to open from Vault. How do you do this now in 2018? That button there. Why is it smaller than it was before? Okay, let's search for GTX 970 in the Vault. There it is. You can see we're now opening revision B in a whip state. Another great thing about using file lifecycles in Vault Professional is that the information filters its way through into your CAD clients. So anyone using Inventor or AutoCAD and they're opening up a file can see the revision and the state in the CAD client, and that is phenomenally useful. That is really useful to see. So we can open up the revision B of the assembly. That's now going to pull revision B in its whip state out to our workspace, and because it's not released, it's not locked, we can check it out and we can get cracking on modifying the whip files that we changed in the previous dialog box in Vault Professional. There we go. That's how you use file lifecycles in Vault Professional. Very, 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 very brief overview of it. There is a lot more you can do. There is a lot more flexibility. There's a lot more customization. But in essence, that is the gist of file lifecycle control. It filters its way through. I mean, that is a massive benefit. Look at that. You've got in your Vault browser and Inventor, you can see all the files that are released, they're locked. It's letting you know you can't change these. There's the tooltip. It says lifecycle state, release for manufacture, revision A. But these files here, that we whipped, they're available to check out, so we can take those, we can check them out, and we can make modifications to these files and these files only, whereas the release files cannot be changed at all. And one more thing before we wrap this up, with regards to change and revisions in Vault, is if you go back to Vault, and let's go into the properties of Vault. When you up-issue files to the next revision, you can get Vault to push that revision letter, the new revision letter, through to the CAD file, so that can then be displayed on your drawing. So, for example, let's go down to the Vault System Revision property. That's the column that you see in the view when you've got a file selected. You'll see the revision column. If we go to Edit that property, let's go over to Mapping, and we can create a mapping from the Vault System Revision property through to the Inventor file. And we're going to tell it to, let's import from Vault. Let's just scan a file in Vault. This scans the available properties. And let's pick rev number, that one there. And we're going to push the rev number from Vault into Inventor, Vault through to the file. And let's click OK. And let's close that down. Now if we head over back to Inventor and we do a refresh on the properties, let's go to the Vault button and then update properties. That should pull the revision B, the letter B, from Vault through to these files, and it has done. You can see it's got a little asterisk there. It says that these files have changed. So if we now go to the I property, or the I properties of this file, you should see that revision B has been passed through into top level assembly, and the same will go for these two files here. So if this assembly is placed in a drawing and you use the revision of the model in your title block, then you should see the revision B appear on any drawings that you've got as well. Notice it didn't do it for these files here because these are released and locked. It won't pull the properties through for these because it in theory shouldn't be able to edit them. Therefore it hasn't pulled the properties through. Okay, there are some downsides to using release management. I'm not going to cover that in this video, or else it's going to go on for longer than it already is. But there are some caveats, shall we say. There are some things to be careful of when using file lifecycle control. Little glitches that happen in Inventor, some little glitches that happen in Vault that can cause some productivity loss whilst using this system. But overall, I would argue that it is far more beneficial to have this release control than not to have it. It is a huge, huge benefit to Vault Professional. And yes, we have items as well. Items are a massive benefit of Vault Professional. Just saying that before someone in the comments goes, well, I would use items. This video is specifically about file revision control. This functionality is in Vault Workgroups as well. It is not restricted to Vault Professional. It is a feature in Vault Workgroups, but you do also get it in Vault Professional. But overall, the series will focus on Vault Professional as a product rather than the middle product, which is Vault Workgroups. Just in case you do go and look at the Vault page and you see Vault Basic, Vault Workgroups, and Vault Professional, my series will be focusing on Vault Professional and everything in it. Read, guys, that'll do. I don't know how long I've gone on for, but hopefully that was useful. It was not meant to be a training course. It's not meant to be a complete coverage of everything you can do. Just again saying, because people like to point out things that you didn't mention, thinking that you forgot. I didn't forget. I intentionally did not mention stuff to keep it brief I don't want to flood people with information at this point. It's not meant to be training. I'm waffling. Right, I'll see y'all in the next one. Stay tuned. Get subscribed if you want to see more reasons to use Vault Professional videos. And stay tuned for my next series, which I'm going to be... Sorry, I've got a dog eating my t-shirt here. Which is going to be reasons to... I don't even know what I'm going to name it, but it's going to be things I want to see different in Vault Professional. Things they should address in Vault Professional is going to be a series I'm going to be doing in the interests of balance. So I'll see you in the next one. Toodle.